7:03, we'll do a count-in for Walpole Cable and begin our meeting. All
Do you
right.
have, oh, yep, there's Ally.
Yep.
14.
Okay. All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of September 10th. Tonight on our agenda we have zoning articles. We're going to start off with zoning article regarding outdoor dining, and Ashley Clark will be on with us to answer any questions. Ashley, can you just give us a quick overview of why the article is coming before us?
Sure. So I think people have been out and about and seen all the outdoor dining, and that is there largely because of the governor's orders that basically lifted all the zoning requirements for outdoor dining. So kind of in the spirit of continuing that, this article is trying to make it a little bit easier for restaurants who down the future want to have outdoor dining. We don't have 1,000 feet of frontage. So right now, you need 1,000 feet of shore frontage to have outdoor dining by right, and this bylaw would allow any amount of frontage by right. That's not to say that there won't be a town process to review those applications. They still go through a licensing process. So it's really a simple article, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So basically we're just changing the business use table to remove the special permit requirement?
That's right. Yep.
Okay. So that's the only change to the bylaw, is just removing special permit, and then they still have to follow the same procedure. It's just they don't have to go that extra level up.
Sure. So you'll see the little number 1. It basically brings that limited site plan review requirement. So police, fire, and building, all the departments that would normally review applications for safety and code and all of those things, that will still all take place. It'll just be public at the CBA, but it'll still go before the selectmen. So just trying to make it a little bit easier for folks.
Actually, before I go on any farther, I forgot to do attendance because we're on a virtual meeting. I got to do a roll call. Sorry about that. I am here. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Allie?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan? I saw Susan.
Susan's there.
Susan? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Her mic's not working. I can see her.
Yeah, I can see her. There you go.
Yep. I can't hear Lisa. Lisa?
Wait, yes,
Okay.
I didn't hear my name, sorry.
Sorry. Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Doug? Yep, he chimed in. I saw the hand mark. Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yep.
Lucy?
Yeah.
And Steve?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Can you hear Doug now?
Yes, we can hear Doug now.
All right.
Any other questions on the renumbered Article 23 for the outdoor dining? If you could use either a raise hand or flag in on the comment on the chat section, that'd be great. It's easier to track down. Josette, yes?
One quick question is, has the zoning board approved of this?
So this hasn't gotten to the zoning board.
So just a quick update. What's the process after, other than us voting on it? Who else is going to be chiming in and voting besides us and the Board of Selectmen?
So we're following the process that you would for zoning articles. As far as I know, this is my first fall town meeting of the fall. So it'll go before the planning board and do a planning board hearing. It was a discussion item under the EDC on Tuesday, and they were supportive of it.
Okay. So it's
Thank you.
just the traditional three boards, us, planning board, and Board of Selectmen. There's no additional input needed.
Not as far as I know.
Okay. Other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious how this has affected or helped businesses. Do we have any data or revenue projections for how this has assisted them?
How outdoor dining has assisted businesses? No, I don't have any particular data on that. I know that anecdotally, that restaurants and that have outdoor seating have it. I would say that this process, the zoning is one of many barriers that exist out there. So, I mean, there aren't specific numbers to give you. I'm sorry.
No, thank you.
Kathleen, and then Mark.
Through you, Mark, to Ashley. I'm having kind of a hard time hearing you, Ashley. I don't know if anyone else is having a hard time.
A couple times.
But my question is, we all love outdoor dining and outdoor entertainment, but we haven't done this before. And I know the motivation now, but what's the risk in doing this?
Ashley, do you want me to kind of help you out here a little bit? I don't want to. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
It's Ashley. So Ashley and I, sorry, Mike Yanovich, Building Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, I'll pick up where Ashley has done a fantastic job. So Ashley and I have worked together on this, and we've worked together with the downtown businesses since we've arrived in town, as well as since the outset of the COVID issues. So what are the risks? We went over this with the fire department, the police department, locations, pedestrian access, handicap access. So there are inherent risks with any public occupancy of sidewalks. All of that is taken care of on the town side with a license essentially to occupy sidewalks or occupy public spaces. So there is a license in place for these people to occupy these spaces. So that is covered on the town side as far as risks go for the town and public occupation of sidewalks and whatnot. So that has been taken care of, and there are contracts on file of indemnification for the town.
It just dawned on me, where are we currently allowing outdoor dining? Is it strictly the downtown, or is there opportunities in East Walpole and other parts of town where outdoor dining can take place?
So currently, the as of right dining is really along Route 1, and it's not feasible for people in downtown to have this restriction of 1,000 feet of frontage on your property. So as of right, meaning straight by the bylaw, it's downtown. But due to the governor's, acts of 2020, anybody who has a business is really allowed to have, that has a liquor license or a common victual license, is allowed to dine outside as long as they can provide the town with a space that is safe. To go back to Kathleen's, question about, safety or, what's the town up against. As long as they can provide us with the space, anybody who's in one of these business areas can have outdoor dining.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Usually we wait for the planning board to vote before we vote because they sometimes tweak things. And at this point, they haven't set a date of when they're planning on voting on the zoning articles. And most likely it'll definitely take place after our book goes to press, because we have to basically finalize the book a week from tomorrow. If nobody has an objection, I'd like to include this in the book as being voted on. So if somebody wants to put forward a motion. Denny, you're moving for favorable action?
Correct.
Okay.
And Mark, we can always, if the zoning board changes anything, we can reconsider.
We can always reconsider, right. Okay, so Article 23, motion by Denny,
I'll second it.
and that was Brian, okay. Favorable action, alrighty. There being no other discussion, Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Susan? I can hear you, okay. Lisa,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Doug? Can you, Doug, read? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and myself is a yes, so 14-0-0. Alrighty, on Article 23. Thank you very much. Next article up, we're going to take a couple things out of order. We're going to jump to citizens petition number 25, which is the solar overlay petition. I believe there's supposed to be some representatives on behalf of the petitioners, their consultants and engineers, if they could make themselves recognized to us.
Yes, can you guys hear me okay?
Sure. Can you give us your full name, please?
Yes, my name is Hamilton Carrier. I'm representing Ironwood Renewables,
Okay.
we're a solar development company out of Lafayette, Louisiana.
Okay.
And I'm Dale Knapp. I'm their lead environmental consultant local to the area.
Okay. We've had a couple of other solar overlays done maybe 3 and 6 years ago. But if you just want to update us as to how a solar overlay works, because we do have a few new members since that took place.
Yeah, Dale, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So essentially, to be allowed to develop a small ground mount DG facility within your municipality, it needs to be added into the solar overlay district to make it an allowed use.
Okay.
So we did submit some materials and can kind of walk through site specifics if necessary. But in order to proceed with the project and kind of enter into the approval process with the planning board and sort of entering into a pilot agreement, kind of starting those negotiations, getting the overlay approved is a really important first step. So we have to go to the town, a town vote to be allowed to proceed with essentially permitting the project.
Yeah, I have a second computer up so I can keep track of all the paperwork here without having to turn things over. I'm just trying to get a handle on what's the nearest adjacent street, because I was looking at this and I couldn't quite place the location.
Yeah, that would be on, the location of the site is 455 South Street.
Okay.
It's the Harwood Engineering property.
Behind behind Harwood Engineering.
Okay.
There's an old gravel pit there. That's one of the reasons why the site was targeted. So a former gravel pit facility that's been, left kind of abandoned for a significant amount of time, along with a suitable interconnection, as well as some visual screening and a lack of regulated natural resources, make it appealing for use as a solar energy.
Oh, that's right down near the high tension power lines with the small plant there. Okay.
The other side of Southridge.
Yeah. Okay. Now I recognize it.
I spoke with Jim about this. I'd be happy to share my screen. We do have a presentation we can briefly show you guys.
Sure, we can do that.
I'll share right now.
Okay. So as our host has the share screen available to you. There we go.
There you go.
Okay.
And then, can you guys see?
Yep. Yep. Be in Hamilton. There you go.
So like I said, we're Ironwood Renewables. We're at Lafayette, Louisiana. Our primary goal here is just, it's a win for the landowner. Hopefully the local community benefits from it, and the power off taker, which is EverSource. I'll briefly go through this so we can get to the site specifics. As of right now, this is actually not updated, but Ironwood Renewables is developing in 10 states across the country and have secured and developed over 2.5 gigawatts of solar projects. And here we go. This is kind of where we want to focus on. This is the site specifics where we want to be. And as we mentioned, it's on 455 South Street. The project itself is approximately going to be 13.5 acres. We have a purchase agreement with Mr. Newhall, who is the landowner and the owner of Harwood Engineering, to purchase approximately 18.5 acres. This project will be part of the SMART program. We have an interconnection with them, working on the agreement right now. And just to give you guys a timeline, we anticipate construction, if everything goes smoothly, by Q2 of 2021. Dale, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're supporting Ironwood in a number of other communities in Massachusetts. Obviously, if you've been kind of tracking the press, there's been some renewed interest in the SMART program. They're kind of reopening terrestrials or ground mount solar in both grid and Eversource territories. So this is just one of several projects that we're supporting Ironwood on. Obviously, within your community, you've seen these projects before. You should be pretty familiar with the low level of impact, but also kind of the tangible benefit the community sees both in the pilot agreement as well as in your energy markets. So, we don't want to waste too much of your time, but we can dive into any questions or details, as deep as you'd like. Obviously, we're going to be working with the town for many months ahead to kind of work through this process. So this is just serving as kind of a preliminary introduction to Ironwood as well as the proposed project. So we could look at the site maybe next if that would be helpful. So this is an aerial photo here that kind of give you some context.
Yeah, as you can see, the Harwood Engineering is to the top right of the orange outline. This is zoned industrial as of right now, and obviously we're trying to get it into the solar overlay district. If you look at the very top of the screen, that's a substation that we're looking to connect to from a 3-phase power line. And I can get Dale to kind of touch on this, but as you can see, the small green dots are just the vegetation wetlands, very minimal.
Yeah, and you can see kind of, this is a good photo. We can kind of see, the majority of the footprint of the facilities proposed to be on this former landfill. You can kind of clearly see some of those old ATV tracks running through it. It's been out of use, for some time, but that beneficial reuse of previously disturbed land is exactly what Mass DOER is looking for developers like Ironwood to do in Massachusetts, is take former landfills, former gravel pits, former developed sites and turn them into solar farms.
Just for refresher, when you're talking about ground mounted, is that just concrete set on top, or are you actually breaking into the surface and setting foundation?
These would likely be driven piles.
Okay.
So ballasted foundations have certainly been used in a landfill setting, but they're typically avoided as they're greater impact on the ground surface. So if you put concrete on the ground, it's going to have potentially stormwater impacts. If you drive piles and maintain vegetation under them, it's beneficial for the environment. Mass DEP doesn't consider the panels themselves as impervious surface, but there's no harm in maintaining a meadow buffer underneath those panels because it provides benefit as habitat as well as more robust treatment of stormwater on the site. So it's kind of an environmental preference if allowed. So on a landfill, you can't penetrate the cap, but here it would be probably the more sort of environmentally friendly approach to use a driven pile.
Well, yeah, the reason I brought that up was because you actually are in our well recharge zones. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't blocking too much surface area for regular rain getting back into our groundwater table.
No, sir.
Yep. Okay.
Will you still be continuing with the tree buffer between Howard Engineering in that lot so that nothing will be visible from the street, or will some of this be visible from the street?
Yeah, maybe we could bump ahead, Hamilton, to the sort of the preliminary layout. You have that?
I don't think that was part of this slide, but
yeah. So again, we're in very early stages, but the preferred approach is to maintain a vegetated buffer so the project would not be visible from the street. If you've been by the site, there's fairly thick tree cover there.
Yes.
So we're set
I'm very
back.
familiar with it.
Yeah, so we're set back behind, so you can't really see the open pit or any of the gravel from the road.
Correct.
We're set back a fair bit off that. You will need an access to get into the site, but if you, as you said, you're really familiar with the site. There's that small ATV trail.
Correct.
That kind of cuts into the site. We're going to try and use that existing path. It's going to have to be, fill added and widened a little bit to allow for construction to occur, but not much more than that. So we expect incredibly limited visibility from South Street, if any. You're going to have to look for it to find it.
That's great.
Now, will it be fenced to prohibit the mountain bike, the dirt bikers who have been using that path from continuing to use the path?
Unfortunately, dependent on some of the fencing has to do with the National Electric Code. So we are required to provide fencing around the project as a power generation facility.
Okay.
Will you be removing any of the soil from there or just going on what is existing as a base?
I think we're going to have to balance the site. So there will be some earthwork that needs to be done kind of towards the back of it. There's a bit of a hillside that they didn't quite fully excavate. So there was some grading proposed, but we don't expect to import or export material.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mark, have the neighbors weighed in on this? I realize that it's in a remote area, but I know that there's a new retail store there or nursery type of thing that this seems to abut, and I'm just wondering if they've been made aware of the plan.
Yeah, we have an abutter list that we've got from the assessor's office, and they will be formally notified. I did stop by one day and introduce myself as a developer and let them know, our initial plans, as well as the Tufts Animal Hospital. I introduced myself there as well, but you weren't really allowed to go in due to COVID-19, so I wasn't able to speak too much. But so they're preliminary aware, but we're going to have a formal presentation and introduction to the project here soon.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark?
Yep, go ahead, Denny.
Just a question. This is just to vote to change the zoning district. It's not approval for this or anything else. This would just allow the next phases of the approval process to continue. Is that correct?
Step one of many, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're not going to be meeting with any boards until they know that they can get an overlay authorization so they can actually move the project.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Other questions?
Mark,
Yes, Josette.
would you explain for the new people what that actually is? Pilot
Sure.
program?
Yeah, what the pilot is basically it's a payment in lieu of taxes agreement. Basically, there's no real table to assess solar farms. So basically, you'd be collecting real estate taxes on open land. But to be fair to the town and so forth, usually the developer or the new property owner will get into an agreement where it says, okay, well, if you were just having the open land, you'd be paying this in taxes, but you're generating revenue from this property, and there's no real way to assess taxes on that real estate. So the town agrees to say, okay, we will do, X number of dollars per kilowatt or whatever, or they'll come up with a plan where the town gets some additional benefit based on the actual operation of the business. So we're not just saying it's land, because they basically improve the land, but there's no way to really assess that improvement and create a real estate tax.
It's an important part of a project like this where the host municipality sees that tangible benefit for, having this facility in their community. And it's beneficial as well because there's no significant drain on resources. So, it's not using municipal sewer, water, or really requiring resources of any kind. So it's sort of a payment as a benefit for having this, in your community.
Any others? I don't see anybody in the chat.
Doug's got a question.
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm just curious, how many panels can you fit in a 13.5 acre parcel?
Oh, I get a quick number. It's a lot. Hold on.
Yeah, Dale, does the site plan mention that?
Hold on, if you want to, if there are other questions, I can get a calc in just 1 second.
Actually, I do have another question real quick. We were talking about keeping the vegetation around the perimeter. Do you see yourself lowering the sight line of trees and so forth, even though you're still keeping the buffer? Do you see yourself removing the heights of trees along that buffer line to basically expose more panels?
Now, I don't think we have a vegetation plan from a site, from top of the length of the tree perspective. I think it's more of just a buffer. I don't think there will be any shading concerns.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's something that's outside of our purview, but I'm sure that one of the other boards would definitely say, well, or the abutters would say, yeah, you're bringing the tree line down to 15 feet. It's like, but we have these nice 35-foot trees that have been in our backyard forever. Yeah.
Oh, sure. And I think that, a part of this, as Hamilton mentioned earlier, is going to be interaction with the abutters to identify visual concerns if they have them. And, typically, once we get far enough along in the actual site-specific design, we're looking at what the height of vegetation is that's existing, how wide that buffer would be post-construction. Like I said, we got a lot more work to do here to demonstrate that the project doesn't have an undue kind of adverse visual impact. But having been on the site a number of times myself, I think based on the preliminary designs that I've seen, there'll be a fairly robust forested buffer along South Street. And then obviously it's a very industrial area kind of to the northeast here. So if there are any views of the site, it's likely along that industrial yard up there. So you're already going to be, as a viewer from the outside, looking at storage material, tanks, heavy equipment, and then to your left there's a meadow with some solar panels on it. I don't think for the sort of the passerby it's going to be an impact, but the area where South Street exists, we're going to focus screening on that. And I just had to run some quick and dirty math. It's just over 7,000 panels.
Okay. Great. So you all set, Doug, on that? Okay. Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah, I know you're early in the stages, but any consideration on, where you're going to be bringing construction equipment in from? Which direction?
Up in the back.
This would be our, we have
I'm basically asking, you coming from South Street from Common or Oak, or are you coming in from Washington?
Yeah, we would come from South Street with that. We have a purchase area on the road frontage. It's about 212 feet. We would come in from there. And as Del mentioned, there's an existing ATV trail that we would approve and utilize that.
Yeah, so, but to answer your question, I don't think we know which direction we're coming in yet on South Street. Obviously, if during the permitting process, the municipality has a preference, we could likely incorporate that into the proposal. Because we're all ears for suggestions how to make this project easier for Walpole.
Thank you.
Will you have to put any type of fencing or anything around it preventatively to keep people out of it?
Yes, so the National Electric Code will require us to put an 8-foot agricultural fence around the project. Typically what we try to do is use an ag fence with a graded mesh, sort of a graded mesh to allow wildlife to pass through the lower part of the fence. We usually use wooden posts. It's a little bit more appealing if you see it than a chain link fence might be. And it just it better fits to kind of a New England aesthetic as ag fence. So we typically propose that.
There's a lot of wildlife up there, a lot of deer and such.
Sure.
Thank you.
Else? See anyone? Nobody in the chat room? Does anybody want to put forward a motion on this article?
Doug's got one more question.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
I'm just curious, for this size parcel, can you give us any sense of how much the town might make versus off the pilot agreement?
I think at this stage,
Too early.
yeah, it's gonna be a negotiation for certain. We need to work with the town's finance department to get an understanding of what previous projects have entered into in terms of an agreement, and then also what the project economics can support. I'm sure that will be fairly transparent, and once we reach that point, that information could be shared, but, we haven't quite gotten, we're very, like I said, very early stages in planning this out.
Yeah, and to Dell's point, I met with Dennis, the director of assessment, yesterday, and he did provide me with 3 examples of existing pilot agreements from 3 other solar companies from the past. So we will kind of be basing it off of those. But like Dell said, it will be a negotiation with the township, and it is too early to tell, how much that number would be. Dennis did say, that first year is usually the most taxes, but to put a number on it's too early.
Yeah, and I believe those pilot programs only have to be negotiated and voted on by the Board of Selectmen. They don't come back to FinCom or town meeting.
Correct.
I know Jim's listening in, but he might confirm that for us if it's something other than that. There being no other questions?
Hey, Mark, if I may, Jeff?
Sure.
I'm just stating, I just got this packet this afternoon, barely any time to kind of absorb this.
Okay.
Q&A, I'm not ready.
You're not ready? Okay.
So
Do people
that's my personal, I'd probably abstain from a vote if we can.
Okay. Do people want to defer until Monday to vote on this? I see a couple of people nodding heads. And where nobody's put forward a motion, I will table the vote till Monday. Ready?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Yes.
Hey, guys, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. We're gonna jump down to stadium parking, citizens petition. We have Jack Wiley, and I didn't notice, did Cindy finally log in? To our participant list, I don't see Cindy.
Can you hear us now?
Yep, I can hear you, Jack. Alrighty.
Cindy's here also.
Okay, I was quickly scanning the list, I didn't see it. Okay. Alrighty. Yeah, so this is basically authorizing or allowing the town to create stadium parking, primarily, I guess, in South Walpole on certain streets and parcels. Can you give us a little bit more background? I know we had, at one time, we were out blocking traffic, so they couldn't take parking at the end of Washington Street and some of those side properties. So if you want to give us a little history of parking in South Walpole, that'd be great, Jack.
Okay. Just a little background. As you know, for nearly 50 years, the stadium opened in 1971. People in Walpole, this affects the whole town, and particularly South Walpole, have been subjected to the stadium effects, which includes traffic jams from the football games and concerts, loud noise from the concerts, which sometimes can be heard in the center of town. Most residents of South Walpole are aware of the traffic issues, and during the hours before stadium events, and avoid using Washington Street. However, for some who may be coming home from work, particularly for a night football game, or just caught out at the wrong time of day, it's possibly waiting for up to an hour to make the journey down Washington Street from Common Street. The traffic causes major safety concerns for the residents. So some of the frustrated residents and some enterprising residents decided to take advantage of the slow-moving traffic and offer their property for parking to friends and others for a fee. This allowed those residents, particularly those living on or near the most heavily traveled roads, an opportunity to make a few dollars during these stadium events. It's been noted that with the local residents offering parking on their property, the traffic in South Walpole is eased to some extent. Under the current town bylaw, it's illegal to allow parking for a fee on residentially zoned property. Town has notified the South Walpole residents of this. The proposed change in the bylaw would allow residents within the proposed stadium event overlay district to apply to the select board for a parking permit. So basically, that's the gist of the reason for the article, and we're glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Is there gonna be an application fee for these parking permits?
I believe there is an application fee in the, as part of the bylaw.
Okay.
There's a fee for the number of parking spaces that would be allowed. There would be a fee charged for that. As far as an application, I don't think there's an application fee, but I think there would be a fee in order to get the
Per space.
permit based on the number of spaces allowed.
Okay. Alrighty. Denny?
So as a lifelong South Walpole resident who has been traveling back and forth that street for most of the football games for many, many years, I think that parking has always been a pro and con on both sides. This is just legitimizing what's been taking place. Is that a fair assessment? Since, if I'm understanding you correctly, they've been parking them in violation of town code. Is that?
People started parking, I think, soon, charging for parking or offering parking spaces, some charging and some just offering friends a spot. And I think it started, then people saw they could make a couple of bucks and take advantage of the situation. And it did it. Now, some years back, then the building inspector sent out a letter to all of the residents in South Walpole. I went to the select, I think, it went to most of the people in South Walpole that they were in violation of the zoning bylaws. So it stopped. And then it kind of gradually would start again. You know, I've got a friend and I've got a friend's friend and somebody else's friend. Yeah. And it, so it went that way. And then this, what was it? This past year, Cindy, the building inspector again came around and notified the residents in South Walpole that this was a violation of the zoning bylaw. So, and this is for the individual residences.
Yeah. So this just clarifies and takes away any of the questions that were there before, because it's been going on for 50 years, and I've seen it stop and then start. So this would just make it all clean and clear, and we wouldn't have to. No one would have to worry about getting stopped by the town or the Crafts or anyone else from there.
I believe they could. There are probably fines that could be issued if the town chose to.
If they choose to do it, as long as they get the permit and do it right,
then that would take.
It would keep it going.
Yes.
I will speak for myself in stating that I think this is a wonderful idea and probably well needed and clarified. So thank you very much for putting it forward.
I'll get to Mark in just a minute. I actually lived at the very end of Washington Street for about 2.5 years with a college roommate of mine. And yeah, from 83 to 85, it was like every game, every concert, there was people flagging people down Washington Street, you know, park in my yard. And, you know, there's hundreds of dollars that were being made in those various locations. And then there were the people who didn't want people coming down their street, like over on Schufeld. And so since, I think, 2012, the town has been putting up the little wooden barricades and having a police officer kind of monitoring a couple of those side streets where the parking used to be pretty heavy, and turning people away so they don't go down those dead ends, so that the residents can, enjoy their own yard and not have people flying by and making noise for all hours. Okay, Mark?
So, in general, I'm kind of in favor of this. It allows the residents there to get some benefit with the aggravation that they put up with. I just have a couple of questions under the be careful what you wish for type of thing. So now if basically we legalize parking there, is it, neighbor A wants it, neighbor B doesn't, but they're going to have to live with it. Are the neighbors all in favor of this? The other thing I wonder about too is, if I own a home there, a big yard, I go on Facebook and I start advertising, gee, coming to the game, I'm reserving my spot. What I'm wondering is, does the neighborhood then become kind of a magnet for parking? So a lot of people hear about it, they start to go. And I know, if I have it correctly, Water Street gets blocked off where you can't access Route 1. Is the neighborhood in danger of a lot of people coming there to find parking? They can't find it. They can't access Route 1 to get to the bigger lots. So now we've got kind of a backup and all. The thing you were trying to avoid, we actually now encourage, because more people come to park there than there are spaces and that kind of thing.
Actually, Water Street does get opened up intermittently, so that all the cars coming down, there are signs posted up at Common Street in Washington. There's one in Norfolk on 115 as it comes down Summer Street, that you don't have access to the stadium. However, the cars come anyhow, and Washington Street backs up, Summer Street backs up, and they do let cars out on Route 1 from Water Street intermittently. So you get stop and go traffic. When people were parking this past a year ago, last season, the lots, basically between the church and South Walpole, which can park according to the zoning bylaws, and those people offering parking, it took traffic off the street. Once that was shut down, there was more backup. And I know that in speaking, because the police are out here on Washington Street, right at the Common in South Walpole, and they commented that there was more traffic congestion when the parking was stopped than when parking was allowed, because it takes cars off the street. So that is...
Okay, so I understand, again, I'm just wondering, do you create a bigger issue? The other thing I'm wondering, Mark, have the police or fire weighed in on this at all? Do they have any issues or concerns?
I'm not aware of that.
Chairman, if I may, I can probably lend a little bit more information, if you will.
Yep.
So Mike Yanovich, Building Commissioner again. So we've dealt with the fire department as well as the police department. Believe it or not, the lots on Route 1, the main enforcement falls under the fire department, which is kind of odd. But that's the way that the regs are written. So yes, they've weighed in. The police department has weighed in. The fire department has weighed in. We informed them of this when I proposed to the neighbors there. Rather than the building department going out on a yearly basis and trying to enforce this, why not propose a warrant article that could legalize what's been going on for? We actually pulled up pictures, developed pictures from the 1980s and reports from the police department and the building inspector at the time that detailed the enforcement actions that were going on in the 1980s as well. So this has been going on for some time. So as you pointed out, this is really legalizing or legitimizing what's been going on. There is still a licensing process that is parallel with this. So the zoning is one thing. The zoning, for background, will still require a 2/3 vote of town meeting. So town meeting still needs to approve this. Even though this is specific to one location, town meeting will still need a 2/3 vote to approve this warrant article. Subsequent to that, if and when this is approved, there will be a licensing requirement. And if anybody steps out of line, so there will be requirements just as the Route 1 lots have regarding no fires, no tailgating, things such as that. The police are out there all the time. The building department is out there all the time. The fire department is actually through there all the time to make sure there aren't violations of the, whether it be the fire regulations or town bylaws. So we're through there. So there is a licensing allowance that allows us to fine or revoke a parking license if there is an issue. But I think you hit it on the head where I think Denny said this is a legitimizing and legalizing rather than the town going out every year and issuing notices and following up with individual property owners. We'll have a bylaw on the books, we'll have a licensing scheme on the books, and we'll be able to regulate the parking that's out there.
I've got
Just one last question. Would this allow, parking at Boyden? So in other words, kind of like a fundraiser if people wanted to use the parking at Boyden to raise money for the school?
Are you addressing the question too?
I guess I'm addressing the question to the chairman, to Mark, and perhaps Michael for the building. Does it allow us, the town, to consider doing that, or is the school still off limits?
No, so the school itself, is covered under a whole separate portion of Mass General Law 48, which oversees zoning in the state of Massachusetts. So for the school's mission, if they're parking for school events, they're covered under the Dover Amendment, really. So parking is a use, and the use is, related to the school. So more than likely, they'd be protected under the Dover Amendment. And if the school had any sort of event, they'd be protected anyway, and they'd be exempt from the zoning requirements of the bylaw.
But I think the question is, doing it as a fundraiser, does that still, because they're basically saying it's not our event, but we're raising funds for the school, tagging on to some other event. Does that still let them go through? If the school wanted to have parking to raise money, it would, so that's not directly related to the school, obviously, and the mission of the school. So the school, would be subject to the same requirements, except the school wouldn't be paying a fee for a license, but they would be allowed the same parking allowance that the other properties would be allowed. Okay. I do have Lisa, who's next up on the list here. Then we'll come to Brian. Lisa?
Hi, just unmuting here. Following this discussion closely, I also feel that it's kind of a great idea, except for, as Mark and Mark pointed out, except for the people who think it's a terrible idea. And I really hear you about the people on Shufelt Road saying, I want no part of this. And I don't think it's right for people who agreed to live next to a stadium to suddenly find that they have to also live in the middle of a parking lot. Even if that's a minority view, I don't think we should impose that upon homeowners in South Walpole who might not be on board with allowing this to be promoted, that people can get a license and can advertise and everyone can be parking up and down their street. I definitely think somebody needs to seek an overall opinion of the people within this district. And even if it's a majority saying we want parking, I still think we do need to listen to the wishes of the minority in some way. And I'm very heartened, Mike, to hear that the licensing agreements would protect you if you have drunken people coming back to their cars and, peeing on your garage or being too loud or whatever, that you could get someone's license revoked. I think that's incredibly important. But I also wonder if there shouldn't be some avenue for individual streets to just opt out and make a vote amongst themselves, perhaps that would be a simple majority. But I do see that for the people who are not on board with this, this makes their neighborhood just that much more dangerous and unpleasant.
Actually, Mike, I was just reviewing a couple of things here. So when they file for parking, it does say that they have to have a site plan review. So that would be notification to abutters for their site plan to allow parking on their property. So then the abutters could turn around and says, you know, not in my neighbor's yard. Is that true?
Right, well, even a notification for the license to the Board of Selectmen, which would be a public meeting, would be noticed as a public meeting for a license for X address on Water Street. Right. So there'd be multiple, opportunity for abutters to, voice their concerns.
Okay. Brian?
So I have two quick questions, and I'm not, maybe Michael could be the one to answer them. First is, are they getting a license for a year? Is it a license per event? How's that going to work? And then the second question is, how is it determined how many parking spots per property?
So the license, I believe the agreement or the conversation that was had, which will still need to be hashed out on the licensing side, because this is, we're talking about the zoning side. So the licensing is a bit separate, other than the fact that it's referenced in the zoning requirement. So the license, I believe, would be for a year, and it's for any stadium event. It wouldn't be, most people think about football, but it would be for, summer concerts, when and if hopefully we ever get to have summer concerts again. So it would be for stadium parking. That's why it wasn't, Patriots parking, essentially. So how many vehicles are allowed? We have a minimum parking stall requirement, and this is one of the things I think will ease some of the problems that have been happening. Is we will require minimum parking stall requirements, meaning you can't smash 30 vehicles into a small side yard that can only probably hold 7 or 8 vehicles if you were to require the minimum parking stall requirement in the town of Walpole. So we'll have a licensing scheme or a parking scheme where we'll tell the applicant how many vehicles they can actually have.
Okay, thank you. And then just one last follow-up. Will this cost the town any additional funds? Will the building department be called in for every event to monitor these residents and make sure that they're following?
So if I look at it, so between myself and the inspectors and the fire department and the police department sending extra personnel out just for parking, because we're complaint based on this. If a complaint comes in, we're going out there, and we had some significant, tension this year regarding the parking, or this past year, I should say. And I had an inspector out almost every single, or 2 inspectors out for that matter, almost every single event that took place at Gillette Stadium. If anything, I think it's the reverse, that now there's a licensing scheme in place. And if there's licensing, yes, we may need to go out there and conduct enforcement just as we do on a daily basis in town anyway. But the town now has a licensing scheme. There's actually, I'm not going to say revenue, because it probably offsets with the requirements or the need to process paperwork and have inspectors out there. So I think it's probably level as far as the finances are concerned. Except now you're not going through the process of me issuing violation notices, homeowners appealing them, possibly going to court. So now we're in the situation where we have a licensing process, and the process will play out with the town in front of a board such as the selectmen if and when we need to take enforcement action.
Perfect. Thank you.
Actually, one more thing, because we're referencing concerts. In the past, traditionally, most of those concerts were evening concerts. Are there other zoning bylaws that, obviously we have the quiet curfew, which I believe is 11 o'clock on on weeknights. So if there's a concert, is there going to be a requirement that these parking facilities now have people vacate in a quiet and orderly fashion by a certain time? Mike?
Quiet and orderly, okay.
Yeah. As opposed to, hanging out in the person's yard until 1 a.m. making noise, and then they honk their horn when they leave.
No, I get it. And as building officials, sometimes we're called on to be social workers, psychologists, and psychiatrists, but I don't know. So there is the regulatory scheme that's in place right now for the parking lots on Route 1 has requirements regarding when a lot attendant can leave and whatnot. These are all things that we can talk about now if we're, going into the residential neighborhoods and saying, okay, yes, this is now legal. These are things between fire and building and possibly the planning board that we can work out what's appropriate, right? Lisa raised concerns over abutters not wanting it, and we've actually heard those concerns. We've dealt with both sides of this proposal, and we understand completely. That's why I felt it needed to go to town meeting in order for this to have a vote. But regulations can be put in place that assist abutters. The fire department, again, and the police department are well aware of what happens at the end of a concert or at the end of a show. So, we can address it. We can, put the regulations in effect and let the regulatory agencies, police, fire, or building, deal with it if and when there is, any disruption or any problem or any violation of that regulation.
Ready, Denny?
Yeah, I just make sure everyone understands. Putting this in place is just legitimizing what's been going on for 50 years. So there are people parking there today. If we don't pass this, and I can assure you, people will still be parking cars in these neighborhoods for another 50 years, as long as the stadium's there. So it isn't, we talk about the neighbor. This actually gives the ability for neighbors and people who aren't happy with it to be heard, have a voice and do things. Because this has been going on and will continue to go on. There's no way to really stop it. It's just, now let's legitimize and control it and let people that are doing things against the code actually do it the right way and be able to give people voices and say and make it a little safer and better.
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Jack.
Presently, if you don't charge a fee, you can have people park in your yard, in your driveway, in your yard. And I know that there are some that, when they clamped down on this last year, that some of the people still had cars in a lot because they found that they had a lot of friends. And so this is going to continue. And I think the woman who was concerned about the neighbors objecting to parking, that and as the gentleman just passed said, that it will go on one way or another. And these are my friends parking. I live on Washington Street near the intersection of Water Street and Neponset. And I've been here almost 50 years. I have not charged anyone for parking, but I have on many occasions had friends or relatives that do park. So I fit into that category where, yes, there are cars and there may be whatever I can fit in the driveway, depending how many people ask. So it will go on, as the gentleman just said. So I just wanted to bring that point out as well. Thank you.
I like the one where the business said you can park your car here as long as you buy 4 $12 sandwiches, and they'll see you in a couple hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Denny?
I just had a quick question.
Oh, sure, Ally.
Reiterating, this takes a 2/3 vote anyway, so Lisa had mentioned neighbors. I would feel that neighbors could reach out to their RTMs in their South Walpole precincts to bring that up. And as well as with the licensing, neighbors would be notified. So when a butter had an issue, they could voice that too during the licensing process. Is this also similar to what Foxborough does? Is in Foxborough, many houses utilize the parking too.
Right, so we looked at Foxborough when we were going over this for a licensing scheme. So it is similar to what Foxborough does. And you're exactly right. So I've spoken to both sides, people who have actually called my office and said that they're not in favor. And I suggested they contact their town meeting member, because there will be a vote when and if this thing gets to town meeting, and people who are for it, speak to their town meeting members. And Jack has, taken the bull by the horns here, so to speak, and brought this thing forward. So I've spoken to both sides, and I believe both sides are aware. If just for background real quick, not to get this thing dragged out too long, we leafleted the neighborhood with the regulation and the possible fines and violations that are involved. And by leafleting the neighborhood, which pretty much equals the radius that's going to be allowed for parking, we got phone calls and emails again from both sides of this proposal. So we've talked to people who are in favor, we've talked to people who are opposed, and informed them of the same thing. There's a democratic process. Contact your town meeting member and voice your opinion, voice your concerns, and let it play out. It'll be a 2/3 vote, and we'll go from there.
Actually, Jack, where it is a citizen's petition, how many signatures did you get from Precinct 4 residents with regards to this petition?
I don't think we can hear.
12.
Okay, so on your petition, there were 12 people basically in Precinct 4 that were in favor of putting this article forward. Okay. Just curious, because the area within this radius is predominantly Precinct 4. There might be a few people on Precinct 5 on the other side of the railroad tracks. But I was just curious as to how the petition came forward. Okay. Others? Yes, Steve.
Yeah, just curious how, I see we have a half-mile radius here, and it looks like there's a dot in the middle of Water Street that it comes from. Just wondering, like, looking at Eldor Drive, say, 4 or 5 people on that street can have this, but nobody else. What's the thought there on that?
I was questioning the placement of the dot as well.
Right. So we actually took the enforcement actions over, I spoke to the previous building commissioner, as well as the previous commissioner before that, which was also me, and Jack Mee, who was the previous commissioner before me, and then followed the 1980s enforcement in the streets and locations. And we took a radius based on the enforcement and where the most vehicles were parked. And we said, okay, here are the streets that we can identify are the complaint-based streets. And we utilized the radius based on Water Street, which is kind of, I don't know if epicenter is the correct word. I know that might be inappropriate, but is the middle of the location where enforcement was taking place. And then we stretched it out, based on an arc within the town of Walpole. So there's nothing to say in years coming, if this thing works out, that those abutters that are not included in that radius or that arc couldn't go ahead and then petition to expand that if it works out. But we want it to be, I think, conservative based on the enforcement action that has taken place. And then if it works out and this thing gets passed, then in years to come, we could possibly expand that radius to allow more streets and more locations.
Thanks.
You tossed your hand up real quick. Denny?
I was just gonna put a motion forward if there's no more questions.
Okay.
Just
real quick, Jeff?
I'm stuck on enforcement, and Mark, through you, just help me understand, the enforcement process. You you stuff 30 vehicles in there, you're permitted for 7. Is that police, fire, Mike's job, the consequences, first offense, second offense?
I think that's all gonna be worked out when they finalize the regulations as to how this application for parking spaces is gonna come forward. They're gonna look at lot size and so forth and say, this is it. And then the enforcement would be, yeah, at some point, somebody's gonna be doing spot checks. Or a neighbor's gonna complain saying, I know you've only got a permit for 10 spaces and you've doubled it. You've parked everybody in and nobody can open a door. So then obviously your neighbors are gonna be saying, hey, this is, a violation of the permit because they were notified of the hearing, then they knew what you were given. So kind of the neighbors will also be policing them. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, so because this is a zoning article, on the building department side, we'll be responsible for enforcing the zoning through the bylaw and through Mass General Law 48. Just for background, that carries a violation of the zoning bylaw itself, carries a $300 a day fine. And then the licensing scheme, more than likely, will have an enforcement, whether it be fines or first, as you said, Jeff, first offense, second offense, sort of scheme involved with it. That remains to be hashed out, pending approval or denial. If it's approved, we'll have to work on an actual licensing scheme for this, for these licenses.
And that's something your department does?
We'll work collaboratively as we do on other issues with the fire department and police who are there on a daily basis. I'm not sure the fire department wants any more regulatory responsibilities as they're pushed thin right now with everything that's going on. But we will, as the people who get the most, I don't want to say, let me step back, not the most complaints, but we're usually the department that gets the first call. There's too many cars. There's cars flying up and down. They're flagging out in the middle of the street. There's a sign that says $50 for parking. Why is it $50? Why can't they do $30? Well, I don't enforce the fees. They're not even supposed to be parking there. So, that's things that we get all the time. But yeah, so more than likely, in cooperation with the police department, will probably be the front line as far as complaints and enforcement.
It just dawned on me because when you mentioned fire department is responsible for capacity of spaces, indoors and outdoors, and public gatherings. As we issue licenses, we'll also have to be cautious of what the COVID-19 requirements are for gatherings. So you can't just create a parking lot with 10 cars because now you may have 65 people in an area that, based on the state's requirement for outdoor space, has to be 25 people. So
let's pray, Mark, that COVID-19 does not apply to the 2021 season because the 2020 season is going without fans.
That's
at least
true.
at the Lead Stadium and for the foreseeable future. So
right.
We won't have to worry about parking Sunday.
The stadium is allowed to park. The stadium is allowing 7,500 people for Revolution games. In seating up to 6 people with 10 feet between family groups. So there is participation for Revolution games at 7,500 people. They're just spreading them all out over the place. So, but yeah,
I can assure you, we don't have to worry about parking in Walpole for Revolution games.
Yeah. Okay. So Denny, you were going to come forward with a motion?
I will motion for a favorable action.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Josette. Okay. And Josette. Any other questions or comments before we vote? Okay.
Mark,
Yes,
this is,
Brian.
I just have one thought.
Yep.
Yeah, just one thought. With the increase, the parking, the people going there, do most people walk across Route 1? I'm thinking about the train. Now with the craft line up and running, and they're coming out of there at all sorts of speeds, do most people walk the railroad line to get to the games, or do they go across Route 1?
So I can answer that, Mark.
Yep, go ahead, Denny.
The commuter rail service does not operate on game days. It is just a Patriots commuter train. There's one that comes from Boston that arrives 2 hours before kickoff and leaves 1 hour after the end of the game. And it's been happening. The train has been doing that for years with this parking that's been going on. So nothing is going to be different on that end.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, so we'll start our vote. Denny,
Yes.
Josette,
Yes.
Ally,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Susan? Susan, did you hear me?
Just give a thumbs up.
Thumbs up or thumbs down? Can't hear you. Thumbs up, okay. Lisa,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Brian? Brian, you're still muted.
Did you read all?
Yes.
Brian's a yes. Doug?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes. Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 14-0-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure seeing you again. Alrighty, now we're on to Andrew and Brian for Walpole Housing Partnership zoning for affordable housing.
Yes, I think you you mean Ben, right? Ben Barrett and me?
Yes.
No worries. So, hi everyone. This is like Groundhog Day, where I'm here to talk to you about inclusionary zoning, but I want to be respectful of the history here, because aside from Steve Hendricks, and welcome Steve to FinCom, I believe a lot of you, everyone should have heard me or Ben or Ashley Clark over the last year or so. This is the third town meeting that we're going to consider these two articles. Last fall, to give you a quick history, there was some miscommunication about the public hearing for the planning board, and there was concerns that it was too rushed of a process, so we referred back to committee. We punted it until this spring of 2020, and of course, because of COVID, we're forwarding those two articles on to the fall town meeting. So I can give a full spiel. I can walk you all through the details here, but I also want to just pause and ask if Mark, that's what you want. If the committee wants that, or if maybe we just want to talk about questions, and I don't want to talk too much tonight.
Yeah, and I'm going to go straight to Steve and say, Steve, what would you like to get for us? A quick summary, or if you've had a chance to read up on this?
Yeah, Andrew was kind enough to send me over the flyers. I was able to take a quick look through them. I mean, I'd seen it last fall when it came on the town warrant. So I'm somewhat familiar with it. I don't know probably all the ins and outs of it, but what you're saying, what I'm hearing is that nothing's really changed from what was on the fall 2019 warrant. Is that?
Yeah, the big difference between last fall and this fall is actually the Article 20, which is the Affordable Housing Trust. There was a lot of back and forth on that article with regards to the power of the trustees, how they're appointed, the number of trustees, oversight of the trustees, and so forth. So that one had a lot of play previously, and that one is the one that's really seen the biggest change in actual verbiage or anything is on Article 20. 19 is basically they fine-tuned percentages and cutoff levels and so forth as to how many units would be in category A, B, and C, and how the percentages are applied to that. So yeah, I'm just basically just going to move on to general questions. Starting with 19, we'll address the trust separately. I see Ally first.
I remember in some of our discussions, we talked about the timing of this and when this is voted in, if it is voted in, for some of the big projects that are coming about. Can anyone just provide an update if this will impact any of the current projects that are say 40Bs or other large projects that are on the coming up?
Actually, a 40B is already exempted from it because they're doing affordable housing. It's the other projects, but once they've applied for their permit, they're under the zoning bylaws that are in place when they pull their permit. So we can't pass something October and have it apply to somebody who put a permit in, August. So they're already under the old rules. Actually, you want to?
A secondary part is, I know we've talked a lot about grant opportunities and different things with having the housing authority and things like that. Any updates on those?
Andrew.
I apologize, Ally. I didn't quite follow about writing grants for the housing authority.
Well, I'm just saying now that we have an active housing authority, didn't that put us in a better position for some incentives in the state?
Ashley is the pro here. Maybe she can chime in, but my understanding is we have the Walpole Housing Authority, the elected board that oversees the public housing, that's often, created through the federal and state programs. And then now that the Housing Partnership Committee is really active to promote more affordable housing through, private developers, if we create this affordable housing trust and the body that is now the partnership, maybe some of those members, maybe none of them, transfer over to this affordable housing trust. Yes, applying for grants can be part of that process, but I don't know of anything in particular that comes to mind. Ashley, do you have any ideas?
I think that one thing that we talked about was that the housing trust, yes, they'd be able to go out and get these grants. They're unnamed grants from time to time. Different things come up that we could apply for that the town doesn't have the opportunity to take advantage of with the current structure of things. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Did I see another hand pop up? I looked away real quick. Josette?
Andrew, I read through all of this multiple times. My concern, and maybe it's there and I didn't see it, but how does this housing authority benefit Walpole residents? The state decides who comes here. We no longer have a say in the placement. This is what happens with the senior center, senior housing. There was a time at one point that the Walpole Senior Housing Board could help Walpole residents be placed. 2 years ago, the state took it over. So every application now goes into, hypothetically, a barrel, and they pull out, like a lottery, who's going to be placed where. And we have residents who have lived here 20, 30 plus years that are now at a point where they could use some of this housing. They're on waiting lists for a minimum of 5 to 10 years, if not longer, to try and get a placement in the abutting communities if they're lucky enough to get drawn. So how do we bring this close so that we are inclusive to Walpole so that our residents are getting the benefit of any housing that is going to be built, hypothetically?
Sure. Can I try to answer that?
Go ahead.
So I think that there are three different things that we're talking about here. We have the Walpole Housing Partnership, we have the Walpole Housing Authority, and then we're proposing a housing trust. So there are three different entities. The Housing Authority is a totally separate thing that we're not changing anything with the Housing Authority. What the Housing Trust could do is partner with the Housing Authority and help with things like ADA upgrades, and like none of the units, is my understanding, meet ADA requirements. Now, if Walpole activates this housing trust and
becomes a more engaged player, I guess, in developing affordable housing, then yes, we can request local preference for those units. We have much more of a say versus, so like a 40B application, we can ask, but it doesn't have as much teeth versus when the town is actually putting in the grants and the funds for the project. Does that kind of answer it?
Well, you can exclude the trust because that's something separate, but I was really concerned as I'm reading through here to try and get, affordable housing units, which I think is really necessary. I'm not finding fault with that at all, but there has to be, in my humble opinion, some way that we can set aside a certain number or whatever that our residents who are fitting the bill for all of this, but hypothetically, we could end up out of 10 units having 10 people from other communities other than Walpole there because of the way it's set up for allowing people to come in. Am I wrong?
So we're allowed to do local preference. It's limited to a certain percentage, but that is something that Walpole can do.
Is that something that is in black and white? Because I didn't see it. And I think if it's not there, it definitely should be there so that we have that as part of this as a protection going forward.
Ashley, I think it comes down to if the project is built with some state funds, then the state can determine who gets placed in those living communities. But if we're doing this as an add-on to private development, then when the developer is done and he advertises his affordable units, we can ask that they advertise exclusively in Walpole for a window to allow residents to get first dibs on the affordable units before expanding it to outside the community. Is that right?
So I know that there's a maximum so you can't say 100% of the units can go to Walpole, is my understanding, but I will happily do some research and find the black and white for you if that's okay.
Well, I mean, because if we're doing a series of 15 dwelling developments and we're only gaining 2 to 2.5 units out of those 15, there's like, if we're capped at 10%, we could not get any of our residents into those communities, because we're not doing a big enough volume. But if we're doing a development of 12 units and we get one, at least putting the burden on the developer to advertise in Walpole for 2 or 3 weeks before they put it out to the general market would at least help us relocate a citizen who's been here forever to something they can afford.
That's all I'm asking for is equity for the people that have been here forever. And I've seen it happen quite frequently where, they are on this ridiculously long list and they don't get a placement, but somebody can move in with a family and they get priority over the resident that's been here forever. So you just want some protection for our residents, considering it's going to be in our community. But I'd appreciate it if you could check into that, Ashley.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anybody in chat. Does anybody else have questions on 19?
I guess just the procedural one, Josette, are you looking to defer voting on this until we get more?
Yes.
Okay.
If everybody's agreeable to that, because I really think that, again, and I know I'm being, constantly going on this, but I really think that there are so many people here, not necessarily seniors, but there's a lot of young people and whatever that would come into these income bases that would benefit from having this.
Okay.
Nope. It's a very valid and good point. Just wanted to make sure that procedurally we knew where everyone mindset was.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, what we'll do then is, if we're comfortable with deferring the vote, let's just open up debate further onto the trust portion, which is Article 20. That way we can have all the debate done and just wait for clarification on our open issues to vote at hopefully one of our next two meetings. Questions on the trust? I know that the last time I looked at this, which I tried to compare the text, was the Board of Selectmen is basically appointing all the trustees. And that one of the members of the, the Walpole Housing Authority is actually getting one person, and the select board is getting the other 8 people. Is that correct, Andrew?
The body is a 7-member board. It's all appointed by the select board. It includes one member of the select board.
Okay.
And the full details in terms of what it suggests or advises the select board to make in terms of their selections, their appointments.
Actually, I just clarified. Yeah, there's a non-voting member appointed by the Walpole Housing Authority to be an advisor to the trustees.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I misread that the first time through. Okay. So the Board of Selectmen does appoint everybody, and it's the same structure of rotating 3-year terms. And there are guidelines in here that the select board should do their best to fill out the board with people of specialties, including real estate, accounting, people who are in the affordable housing group, needing affordable housing. Right, and yeah, and there was a cap on purchasing and appropriations by the trustees, and the checks and balances are that any funding request has to come into town hall and get approved through the finance team to release the funds for whatever purchases they are. Select board would have to approve anything that went over 15,000. So there's plenty of checks and balances that have been put into the trust agreement with regards to the powers and controlling of finances.
Yes.
Okay. Questions, comments on the trust, Mark?
So I've gone through both of them, and as you mentioned, Mark, I find that like there's sufficient check and balances so the trust committee can't go out on their own, so to speak. What I'm wondering is 2 things. One is getting to Josette's comment, and again, I'm all for putting Walpole first, but I'm also thinking there's got to be some pretty strict requirements, because otherwise every town would do this. And getting to that point, what I'm wondering, Andrew, is, they're big articles. A lot of towns across Massachusetts are doing this. Are both the trust and Article 19 consistent with what other towns are doing? Because what I'm concerned about is that if we make it too much tailored to what Walpole wants, does that allow a developer to come in and sue the town, and we spend years fighting with them from a legal standpoint whether these 2 articles are appropriate? But if they're heavily backed by what other towns are doing in the state, then I'm much more comfortable to say to them, no, everyone's doing it this way, and we're just following what the others are doing. I do think they're both critical for the town to do. I just want to make sure that we're not going too much from a Walpole standpoint and risking getting caught up in legalese because our articles are so much different from somebody else's.
Great question, Mark. I'm sorry, what did you say, Josette?
I said that was a good point.
Yeah, no, a great question, Mark. We've been working closely with not just our partners on the select board, the planning board, Obviously, Ashley Clark has been quarterbacking a lot of this. We've had housing consultants help us draft the language and town council review it. But I personally checked in the last 2 weeks, Mark, with the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, the state agency that kind of helps municipalities like us develop these bylaws. I checked in with them to ask, is this IZB, is it still a good idea during the COVID economic uncertainty we face? How are other cities and towns adapting their affordable housing trusts to serve the needs of people? Especially because, I mean, we all know this, but there's a potential avalanche or tsunami of evictions and foreclosures coming. One study last month said 30% of Massachusetts renters are not sure that they can make their payments later this fall when the governor's eviction and foreclosure moratorium expires. And so when I checked in with MHP, they mentioned, yes, actually, not only is your language consistent, but it gives you the flexibility so that the housing trust, for example, has been used in other cities and towns to provide short-term rental assistance above and beyond what the state can offer, which isn't much, but providing short-term rental assistance to, for example, Walpole residents. Should we have an affordable housing trust, or imagine we had one and it had some funds in it, right? We could help Walpole residents to meet their housing needs in the short run in this crisis. So yes, Mark, it's a great question. We're not overly specific in our legal language in the zoning bylaws so that we're gonna be sued. Like, this is very standard language and flexible language used by a lot of cities and towns. And the housing trust itself has a lot of tools at its disposal going forward. So checking in with the MHP, checking in with town council, Jim Johnson and Ben Barrett had town council review the language of these two articles. So I think we're good on a legal standpoint. I think we're not boxing ourselves in and limiting our flexibility. Does that answer your question, Mark?
It
May I
does.
just add
Thank
something?
you.
Go ahead,
May I
Ashley.
just add something really quickly? So all town bylaws will go to the municipal law unit for review and approval after a town meeting votes to approve them. So just as an extra layer of oversight from the legal point of view.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Ashley posted to the chat that yes, we can request when the developer comes forward that 70% preference to Walpole residents can be brought forward as they move forward on their project. So that can be put in so that if there is one affordable unit, we can basically say, well, 70% of one is one, 70% of two is 1.5. So you might get one, you might get two. So we can put that preference out there.
But that is, excuse me, if Mr. Chairman, could I?
Go ahead, Brian. Ben, sorry.
Thanks. Sorry, Mark. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to unmute myself there, Josette, when you asked that question earlier. But the answer is the language of the bylaw as it stands it cannot be augmented to add any sort of preference one way or the other for residents or for people who are have lived here in Walpole. What Ashley's referring to and what you put in the chat and what Mark just referred to as well is on a project by project basis, we can have influence on each of the individual projects. But generally speaking, the bylaw language cannot make a broad-based requirement. So there will be no change to the language that's before the committee tonight in that regard. But as we've said and as Ashley explained, it's imperative that the Walpole Housing Partnership, the Planning Board, the ZBA, the Select Board, everyone understands the meaning of this bylaw, understands what it means for the town and how it needs to be applied moving forward. And so that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I know that we've had some of that discussion as it pertains to the parking in South Walpole for events. It really is, as Mike Yanovich stated, where the rubber meets the road as far as enforcement or, in this case, review of each project individually. we're not going to be able to come up with a bylaw that's one size fits all in that regards, because it would not be legal to say that Walpole only residents could be in any particular place. But certainly, speaking from my part on the select board, and I know that many folks on the planning board, the ZBA, people that have voiced support for this moving forward, it's all of our intent to follow through on this on a project by project basis to ensure that each of these projects, certainly to those who can use these units, but also in a zoning basis when it goes before the planning board. How large are they? How many units? What are the sizes? Excuse me. All of that needs to be taken into consideration. So, I mean, we're on board with that. I know the select board has voiced their approval for this. And so we would have to take it from that point. But there is not going to be clear, there's not going to be a change to this bylaw for Walpole residents. That's not a legal change to make. So the bylaw that is before you tonight is the bylaw as it stands in that regard.
Thank you, Ben.
Yes, I think part of the issue on the project by project basis, and that goes back to Josette's comment, is project by project, they're building 3 and 4 bedroom homes. The couple that have lived here for 50 years have no kids. They want to move into something, but they don't qualify for the 3 and 4 bedroom home because it's a couple or it's a single elderly person, and there's no 1 bedroom units. And so they're trying to get into other areas where they have to go on a wait list. Ashley?
So I'm glad that you said that, because that gets right at I think what these two bylaws are trying to do, and that is have more of a proactive say in what composition of units we're developing. So, for example, if someone comes in with a senior housing project that doesn't have any master bedrooms on the ground floor, that's a problem. That's not addressing the population that we need to be addressing. And that's where our other policy document, our housing study that we did looking at what the actual housing needs are in Walpole, we can point to that and say, hey, we have the zoning bylaw that gives this flexibility to get this stuff done. We have a housing trust that can contribute X amount of funds. We need units at this percentage of the area median income, and we need them to provide units for X, Y, and Z houses. So we need 1 and 2 bedroom units that are ground floor or elevator accessible. And that's what I think these articles do, whereas taking like 40B applications in one at a time, it's kind of whatever the developer's preference is. So I'll get off my soapbox there, but thank you.
Yeah, that actually gets back to, once again, the types of projects. If somebody comes in and they want to do a block of townhouses, well, we want you to create townhouses that are single-story townhouses for affordable units, because seniors can't go upstairs. And so you end up with some units above and below where the affordable ones are underneath, and the young couple that's moving into a 2-bedroom upstairs moves in upstairs. Or you're doing duplexes, and the duplexes are side by side and vertical, so that the affordable units are for the people who, can't get upstairs, and they have a single floor unit. Don't see anybody else in the chat. Josette, did you want to change your mind on voting tonight, or you still want to put some more thought into this?
No, I had a lot of clarification there between Ashley and Ben, so thank you.
Okay, so if people want to move forward on a vote, actually, first of all, is there any more discussion on either of the 2 articles? The zoning change to put requirements in on projects, or the housing trust? Nobody in the chat? Nobody raising their hand? Does anybody want to put forward a motion on number 19? Not tonight?
I'll motion for favorable action.
Okay. Seconded by Kathleen. Okay, let me make my notes. Andrew and Kathleen. For favorable action on 19. Any other comments before we vote? don't see any. Okay, vote sheet. Okay, Article 19. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Yes.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan? Thumbs up or thumbs up? Okay. Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Mark? Jeff?
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And myself, yes. 14-0-0 on Article 19. Do we have a motion for Article 20?
Motion for favorable action.
By Andrew,
Second.
second by Kathleen again?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions on Article 20, the Housing Trust? Alrighty. Denny?
Yes.
Josette?
Abstain.
Ally?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Susan? Yes. Lisa?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
No. Lucy?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Myself, yes. So it's 12-1-1. Jeff, just for reference, is there a particular reason you voted no?
I mean, I stated it, I think, last year. I probably should restate my concerns. I just think the trustee, the housing trust is just overreaching.
Okay.
I don't see the need.
Yeah, I sometimes people get up at town meeting and they ask, and if you're not there, I just wanted to clarify. Okay. Alrighty, so for tonight's agenda, we have completed everything. For purposes of Article 25, we cannot vote it on Monday because it's not on the agenda, so that'll have to move to next Thursday, the 17th. Once again, that's the solar overlay. Yes, yeah, solar overlay is moved to next Thursday. On the agenda for Monday will be capital budget, and then the citizens petitions from Richard Pilla, numbers 27, 28, and 29. So we got a long night there of discussion, most likely. Josette, do you have any updates quickly on capital budget? What we can expect?
I wasn't there when they did the voting because I was at the polls for 17 hours.
Okay.
So they voted, everything that was there apparently was voted 6-0-0.
Okay.
On our cheat sheet here of the votes on the back of Jim's notice, on Article number 17, the Assessor's Certification Program,
okay,
the count is wrong. It should be 11-0-1, and Jeff abstained.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Yep. Okay.
Mark, I have a question.
Sure.
This is in regards to Article 29. I don't want to discourage a citizen's petition at all. Give them a chance to talk about it, but I'm just wondering, from a legal standpoint, can the town actually transfer its pension and its OPEB to a state pension plan and to the state GIC?
Yeah, I sent an email off to Jim.
Mark, I got a question. I got an answer for you here. I've been listening the whole meeting.
Okay.
I'll have a full legal opinion on all three of those articles by noon tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim was saying that he was waiting to hear back from Kyle, so that was going to be my comment. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the only other thing I want to just bring back to everybody's attention is in the new warrant, Jim has broken out all of the salary schedule and union contract articles to separate articles. They will be on next Thursday's meeting. For those who feel strongly about any particular one of those articles or the articles in total, please send an email to Jim and myself only, outlining your questions so Jim can address them either with law counsel, legal counsel, department heads, or so forth, to have answers ready for us for that Thursday night so we can have an efficient meeting. And the reason I want you to copy me is just so I can kind of feel out the level of discussion with regards to each of those pay packages. One of my things that I'm going to be sending in my email to Jim is if he could, based on existing staffing, what would be the impact financially of years 2 and 3 of the contract, and also breaking out separately the police stipend that's being figured out, what that would be as a dollar tag as part of year 3 of the contract after we go through the pay raises of years 1 and 2. So hopefully he'll have a chance to distribute those questions out, get answers back, and be able to present detailed information to all of our questions. Anybody else have any questions or comments for tonight? I don't see any, so I'll entertain a Jeff?
Just real quick, are we gonna start using the new warrant to reference the articles?
Yes.
To correct the gender item?
Yes. Yeah. Jim actually published a sheet with the new numbers. I don't know if it got out to everybody, but yeah, I've already told him he still didn't fix the Board of Assessors vote on the new sheet.
I'll fix it.
Yep.
Come on, Jim.
Yeah, crack the whip, Mark. Okay, I'll do it. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So the
That's the one I was just referencing.
Yeah. That was the new Article 17 is 1101. Okay. There being no other items for tonight, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who went first? I saw Jeff second.
I'll go first.
Okay. Denny's first and Brian, Jeff is second. Gotcha. All righty. Roll call vote time. Okay, Denny.
Yes.
Josette.
Yes.
Allie.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Susan. Thumbs up. You don't want to leave. Lisa.
Yes.
Kathleen.
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Lucy.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Yes. Myself. Yes. We are adjourned. 14:00. See you on Monday. Thank you very much.
A nice weekend.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.